Hey everybody, Greg Pruitt here with the Idaho Dispatch, and I am joined today by Representative Barbara Ehardt from Idaho Falls. How are you today?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you taking time to sit down with us. We're going to be talking about an issue that I know a lot of people are very interested in following up on. But before we get started, I guess, is your district, what's your district number, and then is it just the city of Idaho Falls mainly that your district covers?
Right. So I'm District 33, and that's the heart of Idaho Falls. Most of Idaho Falls. I don't have anything in the county, but District 32, which would be Representative Wendy Horman and Stephanie Nicholson and Senator Cook, they have some of Idaho Falls, and then the county and Ammon. So we're it's the donut in the donut hole. That's where I am.
Yeah. That's where you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So the main topic of today's discussion is about, I guess maybe two topics, and they're somewhat intermingled, but you were the primary sponsor for the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, I think is what it was technically called.
In 2020. Yeah.
Yeah, 2020. So we wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to, maybe for people that don't know, what exactly that is and kind of what the status of that bill is, because it is tied up in the court system, as well as the recent changes to Title IX that the Biden administration has made, and what Idaho is doing in response to that, and from there. So let's maybe start with the Women's and Sports Act first.
Well, let me just say that we passed that in 2020, but just so everyone knows that I was the sponsor, I was also the originator of the thought, because that all started in 2018, actually, after I'd been watching what had been happening to the Connecticut runners, the gals who were being displaced by two biological males in the course of just 18 months, 15 state championships were then held by two biological males. That's how quickly everything can happen. And 85 different times those gals were displaced out of the opportunity to win at various track meets. So it's happening now. People at the time, as I started working on it, no one had anything. It took a lot of work, a lot of time. But I knew that it was something that we needed to do because I could see where we were going. And I remember when it was being heard in state affairs on the House and the Senate side, and people kept saying, as they have in many other states, that this is, a solution in search of a problem. No, as we could see, that's not the case at all. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds now of males who are taking the spots and opportunities away from girls and women all over the country, let alone in the other parts of the world. So, as many people know, I was a Division I athlete, played basketball at Idaho State, and then I spent 15 years coaching Division I women's basketball at four fantastic institutions: UC Santa Barbara, BYU, Washington State, and then as the head coach at Cal State Fullerton. And so I know how hard we've worked for these opportunities. As I so often testify, I'm sure we'll get to that later, but as I travel throughout the states and testify on behalf of this legislation, I tell people, and it's true, Greg, Title IX changed my life. I was 8 years old in 1972 when this Title IX was passed. And people don't understand that back then, those people kind of, in my age bracket, we didn't have a lot of opportunities and things that we could do when we grew up. And I people would ask me, what do I want to do when I grow up? And I told them I wanted to play sports. I was literally told, this is how different it was back then, that's not what girls do. So I held on to my dreams, kept playing, kept practicing until I did have that opportunity to play collegiately and achieve my dreams at D1, and then to go on and coach. So during that time, I have watched where, like me, I was just happy to have the opportunity. We rode, the guys rode the nice buses, we rode the yellow buses. They got pregame meals. We didn't know what that was. We'd get $2 after a game to go buy some. They'd get, meals delivered to them on the bus. We got their hand-me-down uniforms. I could go on and on, yet I was so happy because I had an opportunity to play. But since that time, as we'd worked in the sports for girls and opportunities for girls and women have grown. Oh my goodness, it's just exciting. And to see how many more, the stats are something like in 72, 5% of those who played sports were girls. And by, something like 2012, something like 46%, because that's how important it is and how meaningful it is for girls and women to have that opportunity to play. And so as I watch scholarships and travel and all the other things start to get closer, at least to where we could say, hey, we're in a good position, to see now everything start to change and to see everything be about, oh, no, we've got to let this guy, because he identifies, and it's not right. Even though they've been playing on the men's side for all this time, no, they don't feel real comfortable over there. Oh, so we're not supposed to feel, I see it as it's all about what the men want again. It's about what the men wanted in 1972, and we're back to what's best for the men now. And I'm just advocating for the opportunities for girls and women, because we deserve every bit as much of an opportunity as boys and men. Most people aren't going to go on and play at the college level. We know that. So the lessons that girls can learn, I believe, at the junior high and high school level are actually more important, in my opinion, than even what our young men. And it's important that our young men learn these lessons, but I believe they're more important and valuable to women. And one of the statistics that's been out there for a long time, and it hasn't changed, 95% of female CEOs played sports. I mean, it's just a staggering number. I think girls struggle more with their confidence and self-identification, and sports, I mean, it helps with conflict resolution, it helps with confidence. I've got a list of 100 things that sports can help us with. So many lessons to be learned. But yes, so sorry, just giving a little bit of history and my feeling.
One of my questions was going to be your personal
journey
motivation for this impetus to introduce the Fairness in Women's Sports Act. So.
The impetus really had a lot to do with my own journey, and again, didn't complain about it, but as you try to make the path forward better for those who would follow, and we were doing that, and now we're just going backwards, and that's very disheartening. And those who would say that somehow I'm using this to politicize, I'm not using it to politicize anything. This was my real lived experience as I coached for 15 years at the Division I level and coached and taught. But it's pretty frustrating, and everything that I thought might happen is happening, and it's going to take legislation. It's going to take strong women, like Riley Gaines. When she joined, I actually was out at the 2022 NCAA Swimming Championships in Atlanta when Leah Thomas swam. We had a huge press conference out there, and then we watched, doing a little protest, and we watched those women and their parents walking in and out of the swim meet, so afraid to look over at us because they had been so threatened, so blackmailed. The story of Paula Scanlon, who's now a friend of mine, who was at Penn, who was a teammate of Leah Thomas, not only is disheartening, it's actually criminal, in my opinion. And that may be another story. Maybe I can get her on to come and have an interview with you. But they literally blackmailed those women into remaining silent and accepting Leah when they had zero desire to do that. But as looking at where we are now in 2020, yes, we were the first, and before the COVID shutdown, to get that passed, and as we sine died, the governor still signed it. People don't understand how big that was, because when we sine die, again, if you're in session, the governor has 5 days to sign something, and if you're out of session, then it's 10, and I think that includes, I think there's like 12. I knew what was going to happen. I knew that the entire nation was going to descend on Idaho, which it did, and descend on the governor. And the pressure that he is under not to sign it, with all of the woke corporations, and it's going to destroy the economy, and all of these false narratives that never ever came to pass. Not only did not come to pass, Idaho thrived. So I think you can make the argument, as many of these other states have, when you support girls and women to do the right thing, support the family, your state's going to thrive. And Idaho's done nothing but thrive. We're the fastest growing state again in the nation. And so the governor signed that. And since that time, with New Hampshire with their governor just signing this a few months ago, we have 25 states. Now, half of the states have brought forward and signed legislation to protect opportunities for girls and women in sports, which is absolutely amazing. A few of the states are in litigation, which is now what I was just mentioning with you. Idaho finally, after 4 years, we are headed to the Supreme Court of the United States, which I said when I first brought it. I told everyone we were always headed there in the first place. It's just a matter of Idaho got there first. We're on our way with West Virginia, and West Virginia and Idaho are basically going as a team and asking the Supreme Court to take this up.
When's the oral arguments, do you know?
Well, they haven't even said they'd take it up yet. So amicus briefs have been submitted in hopes that it'll capture their attention and that, they'll say, yes, we need to do something. I know they have a couple other things that kind of walk along the gender line that may prevent them from taking it up right away. So we just don't know.
Is it already gone through the Ninth Circuit?
Yes.
Okay.
As a matter of through this has been slow walked. I mean, it started with our federal district judge, which, people know who it was if you know, Judge Nye, who put an injunction, as he also allowed our two Idaho State athletes from Idaho State to intervene and get on board with that. But then that was kind of slow walked. It finally went to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court shot it back down to the federal district because at that time, through COVID, Lindsay Hecox, who was the guy that identified as a girl at Boise State, had withdrawn from school, and they did everything to give Hecox the opportunity to re-enroll and get going. All things that would never have happened when I was coaching basketball, but boy, they sure bent over backwards to make it possible to keep that going. And then Judge Nye just sat on it forever. That was very frustrating. And then finally the Ninth Circuit inquired, like, where is that? And then he had to send it back up. And then the Ninth Circuit, in the end, supported the injunction, which was disappointing. And so we had asked for an en banc because one of the judges, they'd actually replaced the original judge who had been appointed by President Bush, who in the first oral arguments, because I was able to sit and watch and listen to all of this, just really went after Chase Stragio, who had been the attorney representing Lamba Legal, or one of the LGBT groups. And this judge was great. I think he had gotten sick or something, so they had to replace him. So the justice that they replaced him with hadn't really heard those arguments, and so his dissent wasn't real strong. We'd asked for an en banc, finally got through that, just said, okay, now we're appealing to the Supreme Court. That's just a quick 4-year history of how I've just been tied up forever. And so in some of the things that you had asked, I would break down what's happening with Title IX into 3 separate categories. The first one is one I just talked about, which would be legislation. State legislation brought by state legislators in the legislature. Certainly the Congress has tried to do this, at least on the House side. The Senate won't take anything up, imagine that. So you have the legislation. Then you have another aspect of Title IX, and that is what's called the Biden administration rewrite. And so 2 years ago, on the 50th anniversary, I was in DC for a huge gala we were doing on the 50th anniversary of Title IX. At that same time, the Biden administration was holding an event, letting everybody know they were doing a rewrite, which essentially went from 37 words that we have. The Title IX is 37 words. It went from 37 words to over 1,500 pages. And these 1,500 pages basically brought in gender to equate that sex means gender, which it never did. If anybody knows anything, we didn't have this confusion prior to a few years ago. Everyone knew what Title IX meant. And it was, without Title IX, we can't compete with men. So you might as well, if it was a matter of us competing with men, then just don't have Title IX. You didn't need it, right? We have it to have provided us with our sex separate spaces so we too could compete. And so that rewrite of 1,500 pages is essentially 1,500 pages of punishment. And it's not just about sports. It's important for people to understand the Title IX rewrite is about everything having to do, again, with equating, sex and gender. And just to give you an example of some of the punishment included in that, if you had a 6-year-old daughter and I don't know, you were at school and she went into the little girls' room that was obviously designed for the little kids, the little girls, and a 40-year-old man walked in that restroom where your little 6-year-old daughter was, and you as the parent were out waiting for her, and you happen to say, wait, what are you doing? My little girl's in there. You actually now could be brought up on charges for sexual harassment. And that's what this rewrite is doing.
Would that be under a federal statute, or how? I mean, how would that work as a parent?
Well, I probably couldn't tell you all of that yet. I'm just laying out what that they laid out and our concerns and why it's so important that with this rewrite and kind of in this line, that's why most of the Republican states with Republican AGs had filed, grouped together in various states for injunctions. In Idaho, we are part of the first injunction. We Raul Labrador grouped us with Louisiana. We liked what they were doing on their pushback. So it was Idaho, Louisiana, Montana, and Mississippi. And so we got the first one, then Texas, but I think we have 25 or 26 states who are now under an injunction where the Biden rewrite will not apply, because that went into effect on August 1st. And yes, it is federal. And so one of the things that they're purporting that they're going to do is if it's not being followed, that they want to be able to withhold federal funds, which actually is not something that's been done either.
I didn't know if the funding would be more of what they would go after, would be funding for schools versus and maybe punishment for employees or something of that nature.
The punishment section. I make no mistake. This has been weaponized. I mean, look at everything else that the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, has done to weaponize everything. This is no different. It's a travesty that he thinks he has somehow even the power and authority to just rewrite what has been, just because of the people that he's beholden to and what they want. And just for everyone to also know, this topic of keeping men out of women's sports, Title IX, it polls like 75 to 80%. It crosses all boundaries. Democrat, Republican, black, white, rich, poor, doesn't matter. Nobody wants their daughters to have to go through this. And so that's why across the nation we're able to pass this. And we've had Democrat senators, like in Alabama, when Alabama brought it back in 2023 because they had passed it for K through 12, but they didn't do higher ed. So they brought it back for higher ed. In Alabama, 17 Democrats crossed over. We hadn't had that, and 17 Democrats crossed over, and I think I'll probably have the number wrong, but 10 or 12 just voted present. It's like 27 Democrats stepping up to say this is not right, and we want to keep, and our constituents want us to keep boys out of men's sports. Same thing happened in Texas in 23. I was there again to testify with them, and we had, I think, 10 legislators cross over, and like 7, just vote present. So the tides are changing kind of in that way. And then just real quick, so you have that, and then the last kind of title, and I think that's happening, just as people are wondering what's happening, would be the governors in various states. I think it started with Ron DeSantis. Certainly one of the latest was Sarah Huckabee Sanders, where they've just stepped up and said that with an executive order, even though they've got the injunction, but those injunctions could go away, they've stepped up to let their state know, in our state we'll obey our laws. And kudos to the governors who have been willing to do that.
Okay. Is Idaho, is that Idaho's governor done that or not?
We'll see.
Okay.
More to come.
Yeah, so in Idaho, going back on two things real quick, in Idaho, does it cover K through higher ed? Is
Yes.
it K through 12? Is it? So
Okay, we did the whole
top
thing.
to bottom.
Top to bottom. Yep.
Okay.
So we did it right from the beginning. Just do it all at once.
Okay. So, and then I guess my next question would be for, there's a rising number of youth who identify with a different gender, whatever their biological sex is, right? That is a trend that is increased.
And
It's like
trend,
some sort of 20%. I mean, it's a really high percentage.
Some have it as high as 30% with Gen Z.
Okay, so it's a very high percentage. What is the solution in your opinion on the sports issue? Is it open? Is it having open categories? Is it whatever your biological sex is and that's it?
The solution is simple. You can't. There wouldn't be enough to have a competition. the important thing is we make sure that all people understand everybody's welcome in sports, but we do have to have sex-based categories. And though you're free to, as all of us are, we're free to make whatever decisions we want in life. We all are. But we're not free to choose the consequences. We never have been free to choose the consequences. Those will be chosen for us. And one of the consequences, if you decide to, do a transition or identify differently, we're making it clear in our law, as are 24 other states, that when you do that, that's fine. But you then need to know up front you'll compete in your biologic sex, which would be the male side.
Okay.
We make that very clear.
What's the? I remember from this when you first introduced this years and years ago.
It was
one of the big questions was from people opposed to it was how are you going to determine that? How are you going to figure that out? Let's take the recent controversy at the Olympics where there was an individual who I still honestly don't know if they were intersex, if they were born
we
male,
don't use
I don't
intersex
know,
is a misleading term.
Correct,
They're DSD, disorder of sexual development.
Correct. Yeah. So I still don't know. Everybody said that she was born a female. Some people said she's a male, or maybe there was something that happened and eventually it was like, okay, you're definitely a male at this point. So, I mean, how do you determine that in the end? Is that a doctor?
So the Olympics, a little bit different situations. It certainly wasn't transgender. That can always be solved through a cheek swab. If they have the Y chromosome, they're male. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Sure.
And so, yes, there are DSDs, disorder of sexual development, and that is a rarity, but it does happen. It's the same. People need to understand the context in which this has happened, or could happen. Any of us could have a disorder, whatever development. So, if we were born and our hand didn't develop, and we have a stub, and I have a number of friends, whose family member has more of a stub. That doesn't mean that somehow we have another race or arms without hands, and we have it was a disorder. It didn't develop. And so the same thing can happen sexually, obviously. And so when the gametes are developing, it continues to also develop female genitalia. And so because they couldn't see the male at that time, they assumed, nobody's blaming it. It's a tough situation. But once we find out, so typically then at puberty, when they have the Y chromosome, the testes will drop and the rest of it will also develop, not necessarily fully, but at that point, in America, when we suspect a disorder, we can test. You can always find out the sex. I just say you can find out the sex. And in some of the LDCs or lesser developed countries, they don't necessarily test, and then they find out later. And there's a lot of information out there. We've known about him for years and years. It's been being protested, and a lot of information where he has to practice against men. You can't practice against women because he's so much stronger. So, but that's not the case really that we're dealing with in America. Although let me just say this too: there was a time where the Olympics tested for women up until about 2000 to about 2000. They actually, even humiliating tests, women got tested because men cheated and came over with countries trying to win medals, and that's a fact. Even had a friend look this up, didn't believe me, kind of on the other side, and okay, yep, they really did test. But that's not what we are going to do. It was really that whole inspection thing was just such a misdirection. Quite simply, all of our athletes are required to get physicals, right?
Yeah.
And so they have to go to their health care provider and they have to get a physical. On the physical, now this was the case without us changing anything in the state of Idaho. The Idaho High School Activities Association's physical form asked about 5 questions where a doctor would know if he needed to check for something without ever touching his patient. First, what's your sex, male or female? Okay, you might lie, but what's your sex? Again, I think if you lie, you shouldn't have an opportunity to participate, period. Not on either side. What's your sex? The next question was, have you ever been hospitalized or had surgeries? So if for some reason you've been hospitalized or had some surgery in regards to this would be a time to disclose that. Next question, are you taking any medications or steroids, something, you're asking about drugs. Again, if you're on drugs, great opportunity to disclose the very thing that we would be addressing without ever touching the patient. Next question that came up was, when was your first period, your last period, and the longest time in between? So if you're not having a period, big red flag, you're not a female. I had one representative, one Democrat representative, when I was testifying via Zoom in Alaska, saying, well, we know that some of our really highly trained female athletes will lose their period. I mean, he was just this misdirection, and I and he was doing that because I really kind of embarrassed him to say that you're still going to have a first period and a last period, and very few female athletes at the normal high school or college, and we're talking elite level athletes, lose their period. And if they're under doctor's care, you only want to do that for so long because that's not healthy. So, to still be able to ask what was your first period, last period, in between are key indicators of, are you a biological male? On Idaho's form, it asked a very interesting question that nobody would have expected. Is just kind of interesting. It said, are you missing any organs? For example, it said a kidney or testicles. I thought, well, my goodness, how convenient is that? And then, of course, for men, they have to have the proverbial cough test. Yeah. So you have all of these just questions where a healthcare provider is going to be able to start to ask or dig down into something. You don't even have to touch them. Yeah. At this point. So again, just misdirection. And every time I'd work with a legislator from another state, I'd prepare them for this, that you're going to have in misdirection. They say, well, that's not even part of the bill. I said, it doesn't matter if it's part of the bill. It doesn't matter if any of this is part of the bill. The left is going to bring it as though it's part of the bill, just to confuse people and misdirect the issue.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
Okay, so the Women in Sports Act tied up at the Supreme Court, or I guess waiting to hear if the Supreme Court is going to take it up. Right. You've got a bunch of states who have told the Biden administration that the Title IX rewrite, we're not going to comply, we're not doing it. They have injunctions, and then some governors who. And so where is that? Is there a response from the Biden administration right now in the states that have said, sorry, that was close, and I didn't spill all over your computer, that we're not going to comply? Is the Biden administration saying, okay, well, here's the next step then? Not yet. I think the Biden administration's had their hands full with deciding how they were going to get Joe from running for the president, and kind of pulling a coup and putting somebody else there. I think they've been a little busy because, again, this has all been happening in the last recent couple months. Yeah. Okay. Well, is there anything else in regard to this? Again, you've been kind of involved with this a lot. You've been with Riley Gaines, who's kind of become the face of it nationwide and stuff. So is there anything else that we've kind of not covered, or you've left out, or? Well, some people, if they were following me, heard that this summer, as part of the Take Back Title IX bus tour, where we went pretty much across the United States through the month of June, Riley was on all of that. I was on most of that. We were joined in, different places by different people. For example, Tulsi Gabbard. Absolutely, love her. She's been such a voice of reason, but she joined us in Montana. When we went towards the end in DC, we had Martina Navratilova, we had Nancy Hogshead, I think 4 or 5 time Olympic gold champion. And ironically, these guys are Democrats. So just shout out to the Democrats. Again, this is not and should not be a Republican issue. This is a fairness issue. So that was, and a lot of people. Peyton McNabb was with us, Paula Scanlon, of course, Riley. Peyton McNabb was the high school athlete 2 years ago at North Carolina playing volleyball, where the male player on the other side spiked the ball so hard it hit her in the head, knocked her out, and she'd had paralysis for a little while. Definitely gave her such a concussion that she had to have a tutor through the rest of her school year to get through. Couldn't play softball. That was her sport. She was hoping to go on and play college softball. Could not function in softball. She played, but it wasn't, the same. And so she's been a great voice for all of this also. So just this opportunity to
be able to advocate for this with such great women. Again, when I first brought it in Idaho, I think we had 3 people on our side, on the House side, when it was heard in state affairs, 2 days of hearings, and only 3 people testified on our behalf. And we got a few more when it went to the Senate. Now, as we go to other states and it's heard, half of the audience, and we're talking auditoriums at times, half of the audience is on our side saying this isn't right. And so it's just been fantastic to see people realize what's happening and stand up for the opportunities for their, girls and women in sports. And so, I feel like I've been in a very unique position, that my background as a Division I basketball player and a Division I coach for 15 years really was preparatory. And as I brought it from a place that was very meaningful to me, because again, Title IX changed my life, and gave me opportunities and the ability to do things and the confidence to do things that I would not have had, I believe, without it. And so of course I'm going to stick up for it. I'm going to stick up for it, not because somehow I wanted to politicize it. Unfortunately, we had to write laws because of it, but because it's the right thing to do. And the last thing, Heavenly Father put us here as men and women. We are different. There are 2 sexes. Sex is binary because sex actually has a function. Okay, you have the large gametes, the small gametes. Sex has a function. Till somebody can show me a third function of sex, sex is binary. But Heavenly Father put us on this earth as, men and women, and we are different, and it's okay, and it should be celebrated, and it's okay to be different. So I've been in a most unique position, Greg, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful that Heavenly Father has given me this opportunity to stand up for something that's about sports, but it's so much more than sports. And I appreciate everyone out there who understands how important this issue is. You see, before I brought the sports issue, there had been, like in North Carolina, the issue of the bathrooms, being used and a few things, but it was hard, and it never, they had to walk it back, and people couldn't talk about what was happening until sports, and I knew that. Sports allowed us, it was that demarcation, that line in the sand that allowed us, first under the guise of sports, because everyone cared, but it allowed us then to extend that conversation into the other areas that now we're fighting with the Biden administration rewrite, from the single-sex spaces and bathrooms and locker rooms and pronouns and the gender mutilation and other things, yet that we will be fighting. But that conversation was elevated because of sports.
Okay. Awesome. Well, if people want to learn more about you or get a hold of you or kind of maybe follow what you're up to, where can they do that?
Well, certainly you can go to my Facebook page. I try to put a lot of things on there. Barbara Ehardt, I think Barbara D. Ehardt, for my personal Facebook page. I guess I have to accept you. And then the political page, I'm working to get more on there, but Meta's always doing something that makes it hard. And then I have my website, www.barbaraehardt.com, where I need to get it updated. But they could also donate and help me out. I am in a campaign, but yeah, I do try to, communicate that way. I do need to work on a newsletter. Again, I'm a little technologically challenged, so we'll get that going so people can sign up and get more information. But yeah, and then things like this, Greg. So thanks for allowing me to address some of that which has been happening in this space of Title IX. It's
Sure.
A lot of things going on.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, and I know you're busy, but yeah, thanks for sitting down with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right.